Good afternoon. I'm going to deal with a number of topics in this AfriSynergy program. And I'm going to begin with a question from an individual. But some of the headlines that I'm going to deal with in this program is going to be Obama claims Russian airstrikes are strengthening ISIS. That's one example. Another example is going to be China's military advisors heading to Syria to help fight ISIS. Heading to Syria. You know, Russia's already there, and they're bombing the terrorists in Syria. And the so-called Free Syrian Army is a terrorist organization. It has been bombing and blowing up infrastructure and people in Syria and attacking the Syrian military and trying to kill and remove Bashar al-Assad, the president, the legal president of Syria, a government recognized by the United Nations. But yet, the United States and its NATO allies, along with some of its Arab allies, the Saudis and the Qataris, as well as Turkey, want to remove Assad from power militarily, just as they did with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. A totally criminal act, illegal act on the part of Western nations. Now, if you were on the side of those who wanted to remove and did remove Gaddafi and murdered a number of his sons, then you were on the wrong side. If you're black conscious, you call yourself a black conscious individual, you're not too conscious. That's right. So another headline is also going back to the Ukraine. Russia bridge to Crimea going up at lightning speed. Going to deal with that a little bit also, because the water from the Ukraine was cut off to the peninsula known as Crimea. The water was cut off. So Russia's building not only pipelines coming to Crimea carrying water, but it's also building a bridge across the sea so that goods and services can come more easily from the Russian mainland. Another heading in the news, Blair, that is Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain, urged Muammar Gaddafi to step down and to flee to safe haven during the Libyan uprising. So we're going to deal with that as well. So as I said, I'm first going to get started with a question from one of the viewers. And his question pertains to the situation that's happening in Syria with this so-called ISIS and with who Russia is bombing. They're bombing terrorists. ISIS, the so-called ISIS, is not the only terrorist group. And as I've said for a number of years, at least 2 years or more, there are two faces to ISIS. That is what counter-terrorism is all about. You create another counter force under the same name. You create two faces to create confusion. And as the Mossad's motto, war by way of deception, deceiving. So they have been deceiving you, tricking you into thinking one thing when it's something else. So the question is, the United States has been bombing who? Who have the United States been bombing? Assad or ISIS? Assad being the president of Syria. I am starting to get confused. Now this is something, as I said, I've talked about this for a number of years now. So those of you who have been following the AfriSynergy channel, you know that there are two faces to ISIS. He says, I know they want Assad to step down, but according to them, they are bombing ISIS. According to Russia. Russia saying we're bombing ISIS. Well, Russia is bombing ISIS, but the question is, which ISIS? These people are shapeshifters as far as names, these terrorists. One day they'll call al-Nusra, one day they'll call ISIS, and one day they'll call al something else. One day they'll call al-Qaeda. That's right, and sometimes they have family squabbles. They'll kill off each other sometimes. So why would they bomb ISIS if ISIS is trying to get rid of Assad? Well, the real ISIS has never tried to get rid of Assad. The real ISIS resided up in the northern part, close to the border of Turkey and Iraq, of Syria, for years. Now, who were these people? The real ISIS. The real ISIS were made up of Iraqis. Iraqis who had fled Iraq when the United States and its so-called coalition was bombing the hell out of the Iraqi people. They killed over 1 million Iraqis. That's right, murdered over 1 million Iraqis, bombing them. America and its so-called coalition, its crusaders. So these are the people who escaped Iraq and fled into parts of northern Syria, and they set up camp there. Some of them were former generals and military people within the military of Iraq under President Saddam Hussein, who America hung. They hanged him, which was a crime. It was a criminal act because America was there in Iraq illegally. The war was illegal. It has happened now. It is water under the bridge, but a lot of people died, and you can't just sweep that away. So Russia, not only Russia, but China is coming and is now in the area. We're going to talk more about that because I told you before. Now some of you are listening now that you hear the bigger war drums banging and going. Russia and China are connected economically and militarily. They are becoming more connected economically and militarily. But why? It is because of America's bullying. They have bullied and attempted to bully everybody and anybody. They have militarily overthrown governments in spite of the preamble and the mission of the United Nations being to prevent war. They have usurped the authority of the United Nations and unilaterally done what they wanted to do, overthrowing governments when they want to overthrow them, illegally. This is what Vladimir Putin has been talking about legality, about doing things legally. Here's a clear example. Right now, today, and for at least a year, the United States and some of its coalition forces have been bombing Syria without an invitation from the legal government of Syria. So it is illegal. It is a criminal act. These actions are the actions of despots and criminals. The Israelis, not Israelites, because they're not Israelites, they are phonies, they're false, they're fake. They have been bombing Syria, especially in the Golan Heights, but not only in the Golan Heights, but they have illegally been bombing Syria and killing people in Syria. All of this is illegal. It is not legal. It is against the law. It is against international law. And the United Nations has done nothing about it. So we see today Russia, followed by China, both of them stepping up and saying, we're going to do something to put an end to this. The Russian ambassador went into the embassy, American embassy in Baghdad, and told them, we're going to start bombing the terrorists in Syria. So keep your planes out of the area. The military planes. So American military planes in Syria and Russian military planes in Syria. Will they attack each other eventually? That is possible. But the United States would be stupid, would be crazy, would be insane to militarily attempt to go up against Russia. Because Russia is not standing alone by itself. You have Russia, and Russia is united with China. And China's big aircraft carrier, its first and only aircraft carrier, has moved into the Mediterranean Sea area. So there is something that's going to eventually go down in that area if somebody don't blink. And I can guarantee you, Russia and China are not going to blink. So the United States bluff has been called. The United States has been checkmated in Syria. So the question goes on to say, the questioner, why would they bomb ISIS if ISIS is trying to get rid of Assad? Again, the real ISIS never tried to get rid of Assad. Those people were there in Syria as refugees. And then they militarily, because they had military experience, they then created a military force in northern Syria. So then they, the United States, are not bombing ISIS, or are they bombing ISIS? Again, there are two faces to ISIS. The United States is bombing those who were a part of Saddam Hussein's military infrastructure, and they fled into northern Syria. That's who the United States is bombing. The United States is not bombing the face of ISIS that they created themselves and who are doing their dirty work in Syria. That particular face of ISIS would, in fact, attack the Syrian military. That particular face of ISIS would, in fact, attack Russian forces or Chinese forces in Syria. And there is no difference between the agenda primarily of that face of ISIS and the face of the so-called Free Syrian Army. All terrorists, all backed and supported by the United States and its allies in Syria. So he says, I've been thinking that they quietly are financing ISIS. Well, that's something that I've said for years, that for at least 2 years, that the false ISIS, the phony ISIS is being financed. That is the CIA, that is the Mossad, that is MI6 of Britain, MI6, MI5 of Britain. These are intelligence agencies who are running this fakery. counterterrorism, you got to have two. So they create a phony, a real, and a fake. But they try to make it look like they are working with Russia in getting rid of ISIS. Yes, of course. But Russia is making it clear that it's calling its own shots in Syria. Because the American government, its agenda is not to annihilate ISIS. The fake ISIS, their ISIS. Their agenda is to remove Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria, even if they have to kill him and murder him and his family like they did Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. That is their agenda, and that is the primary reason why Russia is there and China is also moving into that area, because this is their agenda, is to remove that government. A few years ago, even John McCain, Senator John McCain, stated that if Vladimir Putin is not careful, the same thing that happened to Muammar Gaddafi can happen to him. Now, this is an American who ran for president, a Zionist neocon, stating and threatening the leader, the president of Russia, the Russian Federation. Now, how crazy and insane is that? It's extraordinarily insane. But that is the nature of many of these American leaders. So he ends with the question, can you clear this up? And that's exactly what I'm doing, is clearing this up, making it straight, making it clear as to what's going on there and what's at stake there and who the real players are there. No fakery. No lies, just removing the smoke and making it clear so that any of you can understand what's going on there. Now, moving on, let's move over to Obama. Obama claims Russian airstrikes are strengthening ISIS. In his first public comments since Russia launched anti-terrorist airstrikes in Syria, U.S. President Barack Obama was fiercely harsh, claiming that Moscow's military operation was counterproductive and is not distinguishing between Islamic State targets and the so-called moderate opposition. There is no moderate opposition. That opposition are terrorists. That's what they are. They were killing Christians, been doing this for the last 5 years, and they were killing Muslims in Syria. They were attacking the Syrian architecture, infrastructure. They were blowing up buildings, roads, oil refining plants, gasoline refining plants. This is what they were doing. Known by many names, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, or no name, Al-whatever. They were destroying infrastructure in Syria, just as they did in Libya. In fact, some of the terrorists who were fighting in Libya, and John McCain and Barack Obama and that crazy Hillary Clinton and Suzanne Rice, did I call all the names out? I'm sure I didn't, but you know what I'm talking about. They were lying and said that Muammar Gaddafi is killing his own people. He's bombing his own people. He's using jets to drop bombs on his own people. Damn lies. And some of you non-conscious, unconscious blacks in the so-called conscious community were quiet about it, or you were cheering. Woohoo! We see our red, black, and green flag flying in Libya. Dummies. That's right. You were wrong. Where are you now? So in the so-called moderate opposition, Barack Obama is lying. He's lying. But that's not the first time he's lied. He was bombing through NATO. He was bombing the black city of Tawarga, a city of well over 30,000 black Libyans. Nice houses, nice buildings. NATO bombed that city day and night. Today, that city is totally empty. It's a ghost town. Why? Because of what NATO did to prepare the way for these terrorists to come in and run all of the people out of Tawerga, and then swore that that city would never again be occupied by those people. These were black Libyans who were protected under Muammar Gaddafi. Now, where were you so-called Negroes right here in the diaspora, you so-called Negroes right here in America when that was happening? Most of you were quiet about it. And when you were quiet about it in 2011, I told you that if you're quiet about that, then watch and observe as they step up. The system, cops, the paramilitary, the vigilantes in America step up their killing of blacks in the streets right here in America. And that is exactly what happened. And that's what's happening right now. Right here in America. You're quiet when your brothers and sisters are slaughtered over there because you're foolish and ignorant, and some of your teachers have mistaught you. And then you react based upon those misteachings because you don't know the truth, because your teachers did not know the truth. And if they did, some of them, they're not going to tell you the truth because there's no profit in telling you the truth. So the United States leader accused, talking about Barack Obama, accused Russia of weakening the Syrians' rebels' chances of eventually toppling President Assad's government and somehow strengthening ISIS as a result. ISIS is not the issue with the American government. The overthrow of Assad is the issue. You will constantly see the name Assad, 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 not ISIS, on the lips of American leaders, because they want Assad out. They want him out or dead. This is what the international Zionist Western bankers want in Syria. This is what they did in Libya. Now, Vladimir Putin was not president at that time. He was prime minister. He had went to the position of prime minister. Medvedev was the president at that time, and that's when Russia sustained on the United Nations Security Council and did not vote on that resolution 1973, of which NATO and the United States broke the law and went over and above what 1973, that resolution, was all about. I talked about all of this in 2011. All of it. Now, here we are again with this. And they went in and destroyed Libya. Libya now is a terrorist state, occupied by terrorists, overthrown the government there by terrorists, including, when I say terrorists, it includes the United States of America. What did Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say before he was killed? He said that America is the biggest purveyor of terrorism in the world. That was over 40 years ago. Is that not the case even more so today? Yes, it is. And we're seeing that. And Russia and China and other nations are calling their bluff. The bully. Most people do not like bullies. They fear bullies until the bully is challenged and put in his place, and then the others will jump on that bully. And that's what you're going to see with the United States. You're going to see, as China and Russia is calling America's bluff, you're going to see European Union states who are then going to change. And you're beginning to see that already. Germany's one example. You're beginning to see some of that already. So, the moderate opposition in Syria is one that if we ever are going to have a political transition, we need. And the Russian policy is driving those folks underground, or creating a situation in which they are decapitated, and it is only strengthening ISIL. Those are the words of President Obama. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Long before Obama became president, this was during the Bush and Cheney regime. It was stated, and Wesley Clark mentioned this, General Wesley Clark, that America was going to overthrow, this was coming from the Bush people, was going to overthrow 7 governments. Syria was one of those governments. Libya was another one of those governments. So they created the phony and false conditions. Gaddafi is killing his own people. And they put these so-called peaceful protesters out there in the streets. And then they had snipers hiding in certain areas shooting at the so-called peaceful protesters. All a CIA, Mossad, MI6 game. The so-called color revolutions. All fakery. All promoted and built by Western governments. We saw the same thing happen in the Ukraine. So, at the same time, the United States president admitted that the Pentagon's support to the so-called moderate rebels has not worked the way it was planned because the rebels consider President Assad their primary target and are not willing to confront Islamic State. Now, let me just break this down and show you how stupid this is. Now, this would be just like if I, T. West, if I was to say, I'm going to declare war on the American government, and I go out and I arm myself, and I have another nation state, let's say Mexico. Mexico helped me arm myself and I gather together my group of people, and we're going to overthrow the American government because we don't like the government. We want to remove Barack Obama. We want to remove the American Senate. We want to remove that whole power structure. Now, what would happen to me? How would the American government brand me? They would brand me as an enemy combatant. They would not put me on trial, most likely not put me on trial. They would shoot me dead. As an example to anyone and everyone who would do what I attempted to do, that this is what's going to happen to you. Now, this is exactly what the so-called Free Syrian Army personnel are doing in Syria. You would not want that to happen right here in the United States of America. Then why do you go along with and support these lying politicians, these frogs, lying frogs, who are supporting this type of foreign policy? Why would you vote for these devils? You should not vote for them. The timing, the training and equip program was a specific initiative by the Defense Department to see if we could get some of that moderate opposition to focus attention of ISIL in the eastern portion of the country. So focus it on ISIL in the eastern portion of the country. The words of Barack Obama. And I am the first one to acknowledge it has not worked the way it was supposed to. Well, good. It's not supposed to work because it's fakery. It's phony. It's based on lies. It's based upon criminality. Criminals. Criminal behavior. It has not worked the way it was supposed to, and I think that the Department of Defense would say the same thing. Well, really. I mean, if I show you some of the videos of what some of these people are saying in the Defense Department, some of these politicians are saying, you would laugh at them if you understood what I understand. And it don't take much to understand some of this crazy stuff. You would laugh at this nonsense. And that's what it is. A bunch of nonsense. And they're selling and peddling you these lies. Very clear and obvious lies. A day and age when many of you will believe a lie as being the truth, and you will take the truth and believe the truth as being a lie. So you're flipped upside down, topsy-turvy. You don't know whether you're coming or going. So the problem here is Assad and the brutality he's inflicted on the Syrian people. Again, the words of the lying President Barack Obama. He's lying. Assad is defending the Syrian people. There are opposition groups out there, terrorists, who are trying to destroy Assad. Assad was reelected by an overwhelming majority. And if the elections were to happen again, it would be the same result. Why? Because most of the Syrian people know that Assad means well for Syria. And they know that these terrorists are fighting in the interest of their foreign providers, the ones providing them with the money, with the weaponry, with the training to kill Syrian people, to kill members of the Syrian government, to kill members of the Syrian military force. It was in our interest. So, well, Obama said, adding that the United States will continue to support moderate opposition groups to ensure an eventual transition to democracy. Democracy, really, really, really. Now, for, well, 35 years, I've indicated that democracy, what the hell is it? I've broken it down. Democracy comes from the Greek word demokratia. Da means to cut or divide. Kratia means the people. To cut and divide the people and rule them. Divide and rule. Create two. Create Democrats, Republicans. Create two. And then divide and rule them. Always have them bickering and fighting it with each other. You see that in the American Congress. Republicans and Democrats always fighting and bickering with each other. Can't get anything done. But one thing that they do not bicker about is that doggone Zionist state of Israel. Most of them are on the same page with that. However, a rare exception with this whole Iran deal, Netanyahu has lost twice. Benjamin Netanyahu. The same Netanyahu who claimed and stated after the 9/11 attacks that the 9/11 attacks were most beneficial to the state of Israel. Yes, it was, because they were behind it. They, along with their the House of Saud, the Saudis, those two were behind it. And those are, the Saudis are crypto so-called Jews. They are of the Sepharvite group. Phony. But they're working together. That's what they're doing. That's why you see the Saudis and the Qataris there, wherever Israel and the United States are aligned, you see the Saudis and the Qataris aligned against the same people. You need to know the truth. You need to know what is happening. Don't be deceived by these people. They're liars. They mean you no good. They mean the world no good. And they have no problems wiping out millions of people. And then say they did it in the name of democracy. They did it in the name of peace. They did it in the name of liberty. They did it in the name of justice. This is how upside down and a mental case these people are. Demented in their minds. Reprobated minds. Corrupted minds. It was in our interest to make sure that we were engaged with the moderate opposition inside of Syria, because eventually Syria will fall. The words of Obama again. Eventually Syria will fall. Not if Russia and China has anything to say about it. No. So when Bush and Cheney, through trickery and lies and the ruling by the Supreme Court, came into power in the United States, it was that regime who said that America should do what it wants against whom it wants as often as it wants, and there is no reason why why she cannot rule until the end of time. Now, oh, such words of arrogance. But she shall fall. She shall be brought down, brought low, and made an example of for every nation who chooses or think about going down this path of exceptionalism, saying she can do anything that she wants because she is an exception. She can start wars wherever she wants because she is an exception. She can destroy whoever she wants, any nation, any leader, because she is an exception. She is exceptional. So Obama lied. That's the reality. He lied. Now let's move over here to China's military advisors heading to Syria to help fight who? ISIS. Two faces to ISIS. So we can throw under ISIS, let's throw Free Syrian Army under there. Let's throw Al-Nusra under there. Let's throw all these other Takfiri terrorist groups under there. Let's throw Al-Qaeda under there. Let's throw all these groups under the term ISIS. Let's put that in quotes, ISIS, because those are the elements, the groups that the American government, the Israeli government, the British, the French are supporting. The Saudis, the Qataris are supporting. Turkey are supporting in their effort to create mayhem and terror in the region of that world, in that region of the world, in Syria and elsewhere as well. So the Chinese will be arriving in the coming weeks, a Syrian army official told the Lebanon-based news website. Now, most of you, I'm sure you did not see the Chinese and hear the Chinese premier speak earlier this week, or was it last week? But anyway, in the last 2 weeks at the United Nations, speaking to the General Assembly. But one thing, if you heard him speak, you heard him speaking about the close connection with Africa. Because China became a permanent member of the Security Council because of the African states' vote in the United Nations. So China is very close and connected to Africa economically. And you heard China also indicate that they are going to provide thousands of peacekeeping troops operating under the United Nations. Now, so you see Russia moving in there. You see China moving into that area. You heard the Chechenian leader in Russia say today that if Vladimir Putin gave him the go-ahead, the Chechen forces in Chechnya region of Russia, the go-ahead to go to Syria, they would go there and they would put an end to the terrorists in Syria, just as they put an end to the terrorists fighting in Chechnya. So you see a gathering of the forces in that region of the world. They are being brought together in that region of the world. For what purpose? The purpose is to put an end to the old order, which had a desire to create a new and more tyrannical order, but to put an end to that order in that area of the world. Benjamin Netanyahu, last week, a week or two ago, he traveled to Moscow to try to convince Putin not to do what Putin did the following week, which was he started the bombings in Syria. Putin has locked up Ashkenazim, some of you call them Jews, but that's the wrong term, has locked them up in prison in Russia for breaking Russian law. Those who did not get locked up, they fled. And those who did not flee, they complied to Russian law. So all of those oligarchs who used to rule and run the roost in the past in Russia, they no longer run the roost. They no longer enforce their will and dictates in Russia any longer. That is not the case in the United States of America. America experiences many of the problems that it is experiencing because of this small, minute few who have a bridle in the mouth of this large nation. And just like a large horse, this one single small bridle is controlling the entire beast. That's the case with America and how this false so-called Jews are controlling America. Now, that is not to indict all of them who call themselves that, because all of them are not like that. But there is a powerful few who are. And there are those of you who support and back them. And most of you who back them and support them, you're Zionists. You're not even a so-called Jew. You're Zionists. But you're supporting their little dirty work. And when you tell the truth about them, they want to attack. They want to say, oh, that's anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a misnomer. Why is it a misnomer? Because those people are not even Semites. Semite means Afro-Asiatic. The people blending together, the African and Asiatic people blending together, Afro-Asiatic. Then you have the blending of the languages to become the Afro-Asiatic languages, known as Semitic languages. Now, you have the Sephardim, they're Semitic, but the Ashkenazim are not, for the most part, Semitic. But anti-Semitism, that's like a code word for don't tell the truth. Don't tell the truth. We don't want to hear the truth. We want to suppress the truth. We don't want to hear the truth. But the truth marches on. The truth seeks and finds its own level. The report claims that a Chinese naval vessel is on its way to Syria with a dozen military advisors. They will reportedly be followed by troops. Now, this ship that's already there, in fact, is the aircraft carrier, the only big one that China has. It's in the region. The ship is said to have passed through the Suez Canal in Egypt and is making its way through the Mediterranean Sea. So, you see, China is now entering the picture. The main goal of the center will be gathering, processing, and analyzing current information about the situation in the Middle East, primarily for fighting ISIS. This is according to a military diplomat who said this to the Russian news agency, RT, Russia Today, or Russian TV. So you see China gathering in that region of the world. There's a purpose for this. Russia, the bridge to Crimea, going up at lightning speed. Now, this bridge that's going up across the Black Sea, or is the Black Sea there? Yeah, I think it's the Black Sea there. That's going up in that area there, coming from the Russian mainland and then going all the way across to the Crimea Peninsula. Now, the United States raised the whole big stink and applied its sanctions against Russia because Russia once again reclaimed what was once its Russia's in the first place until 1967. So Russia reclaimed Crimea because of the coup that the United States had sponsored in Kiev, in the Ukraine, to establish and put into power that junta in the Ukraine. And then America lied about it and says, well, we don't have any troops in the Ukraine. We had nothing to do with that coup. These people lie like you know the sun is going to rise tomorrow. This is how often these people lie. And they seriously think that they can get away and escape with all of these lies. And as I said in the intro, that this bridge, not only the bridge, but Russia is also building water pipelines that will bring fresh water into Crimea. Why? Because the criminals in Kiev, the neo-Nazis, the far right in Kiev have cut off the water coming from the Ukraine into Crimea. But yet, Russia is empowering and making it possible for Crimea to continuously be a success. So that's all I'm going to say about that situation with the Ukraine, because I've covered that quite extensively in the past, the situation in the Ukraine. So black folk, you are not just one dimension. Many of you, all you are into is the tombs. You know, tombs are where dead folks are. Too many of you talk too much about dead people. I'll guarantee you, I will see many of you talking about, you're talking about a person, the person's dead. If he's black, he's dead. You don't talk about the living. You don't deal with what's here and now in the land of the living. You don't deal with international matters. And those matters of foreign policy affects you in your various communities right here in the United States of America. But your teachers have not taught you these things. They've taught you other things. Oh, you have to go to the pyramids. And oh, it was so inspirational to go down into the pyramids and to look at all of the artifacts and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all well and good. But you should not spend your whole damn life digging in that which is dead. I don't know how much strongly I can say that. Deal with those who are living, alive. Because that is what's going to move you forward. Oh, whoa, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin is gone. Oh, Malcolm X. Malcolm's gone. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeshua is gone. Now, that does not mean that certain good principles and teachings that these individuals brought forward, that you should not expound upon those, but doggone it, don't spend your whole doggone life in social media and elsewhere dramatizing about that. Deal with the day-to-day situation that's going to help move you and your children forward. Because if you don't, you're going to continuously move backwards. Now, I'm going to close out with Blair. That is, Tony Blair urged Muammar Gaddafi to step down or flee to a safe haven during the Libya uprising. Now, Tony Blair is a doggone snake, a dog. That's what he is. You can't trust that idiot. The ex-Labour Prime Minister who presided over Britain's 2003 invasion of Iraq, okay, I said he's a dog, and its bloody aftermath, how many were killed in Iraq? Over 1 million Iraqis were killed, mostly civilians. But he urged Muammar Gaddafi to find a safe place to go as unrest escalated in Libya in 2011. A safe place to go. Really? Really? They were determined to kill Muammar Gaddafi. No matter where he went. Had he left, had Saddam Hussein. It was the same thing with Saddam Hussein. It says, oh, we provided him a path out. We provided him with a way out. But he didn't take it. These men knew, and they knew, as I said, that they were going to be killed whether they stayed in country or left to some safe haven. They knew this. Gaddafi chose to fight. Saddam Hussein, at some point, he decided to hide. Gaddafi chose to fight. He died. He died for his convictions. He died believing in doing right for the Libyan people. Now some of you are saying, oh, T-West, Gaddafi was this, Gaddafi was that, blah, 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 blah. Come to me with the facts. And if you say too much, I will use your own doggone words to twist and tie you up and show you where your words are false. The fact is, Gaddafi, in Libya, under Gaddafi, Libya was number 51 in the Human Development Index. That's out of more than 200 nations. 51. Libyans had a free college education within Libya, or they could go elsewhere in the world and the government would pay for it. That's right, in Libya. Blacks had a nice city that they lived in Tawerga. That was one of the cities that some of them lived in Libya. Nice homes. Who bombed and destroyed those homes? The same criminals who came to Africa and devastated families and carried away millions and millions of blacks to enslave them in Western countries, and before that, to enslave them in Arab countries. And you want to talk about Muammar Gaddafi this, Muammar Gaddafi that. Muammar Gaddafi, before he was killed, his last speech at the United Nations was about how the United Nations was not abiding by its preamble, which was to prevent wars, not start wars. And many of those members of the United Nations was pissed off. One of them was the doggone Nigerians. And many of you Nigerians, your parents, collaborated on the west coast of Africa in the enslavement of millions of our people. And many of you are still betraying people, betraying black people around the world, betraying other Africans. Corrupt. Oh, why are you picking on the Nigerians? Do right and you won't get picked on. I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're white, brown, red, yellow. Oh, I thought T. West was a racist. Oh no, I'm a truthist. I'm a rightist. What's right versus what's wrong? Black don't make you right. And we know white don't make you right. So Blair told Gaddafi that removing himself from his stronghold in Tripoli as a part of a managed political transition was necessary before the crisis in Libya reached the point of no return. Now, isn't that the same thing that they're telling Bashar al-Assad in Syria? You step down. This is our dictate to you. You step down. We don't care if the people voted you into power. You step down because we don't want you. Our bankers don't want you. The Israelis don't want you. You step down. Now that's the definition of a bad dictator. Russia is there to put an end to that. China is there to put an end to that. To checkmate the United States and its little bastards in this so-called coalition that it has. Colonel Gaddafi's regime had attracted global condemnation at the time after his security forces opened fire on crowds of pro-democracy protesters. A damn lie. Never happened. Never. And then they also said that Gaddafi was bombing, using airplanes to bomb peaceful protesters. A damn lie. Suzanne Rice. A lie. Hillary Clinton. We came, we saw, and he died. That hussy, Hillary. And she'll never be president. She won't even win the Democratic nomination. But I've said that for a few years now. But watch. She won't be there. So, and Hillary was the biggest and the loudest voice. She was louder than John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and what's his name? He's out of there now. But the Three Amigos, that old other one, Lieberman, Joe Lieberman. She was louder than those cats. And then so she was so loud, so to speak, that when Barack Obama had that annual dinner that they have, that black tie dinner in Washington, D.C., Obama says, oh, that's probably Hillary Clinton out there throwing rocks at my window on Pennsylvania Avenue. Why did he say that? He said it because Hillary was nagging him, and the French president, Sarkozy, was nagging her in regards to Obama becoming engaged against Libya militarily. I know the history because I reported the history more than anyone else at that time in 2011. I reported the history. I recorded the history. So I know the history. And I can go into great detail as to how Libya benefited under the Libyan government, under the Jamahiriya government. Look at Libya now. Are you better off today than you were in 2010, Libyans? Are you? Libya is a failed state. It is a state run by terrorists. They want the same in Syria. They created the same situation in Iraq. They created the same situation in Afghanistan and in certain pocket areas of Pakistan. That's what these people bring. They bring death while they're saying to you, oh, we're bringing peace, democracy, liberty, justice. We're bringing these things. They're not bringing those things. They're lying to you. And Russia and China, they have called these people's bluff. So, Gaddafi was murdered, savagely murdered. His sons, some of his sons, murdered. And you still have Saif, who's sitting in the prison there. And then another son also sitting in a prison there in Libya. These people are criminals who are holding them. They were criminals, the ones who killed Gaddafi and his family members. The ones who killed others in Libya. Libya was a secular country. Iraq was a secular country. Women had rights. Women went to school. They were educated. Look at them now. Look at Libya. Look at Iraq. These are the types of criminals that America and its agents, its Zionist agents, are setting up. It's very clear. I don't have to shout this. Well, maybe I do. Some of you are so dead. I do need to shout. I need to act like a preacher. I need to yell at you maybe. Maybe you'll wake up, the dead. But I doubt it. This is T West with AfriSynergy.